What do I do if I'm married to someone who's lazy and won't be the spiritual leader of our home? And then the second part is what happens when that takes place on the gal side, and I know who sent this in. I feel like I'm failing as a mom, worker. They work outside the home, as a home caretaker, taking care of the house, to your point, etc., but I don't have any help. So assuming these are believers, okay, we'll just go that route. What do you do if you're married and your husband's a lazy football watching dude and your house is falling apart and you're in this situation? Like, what do you do?
So we're assuming he's actually lazy and only watching football and not working? Because I need to know that to answer this question.
Yeah. I mean, I know we could rabbit trail based off of...
Or maybe he's not doing as much as she would like him to do.
Well, I can read into that too.
Yeah.
So...
we'll just say he's lazy and she feels like he's not helping.
Okay. If he's lazy, there's no changing someone else, but there's prayer that's super powerful. So if that's an actual thing, we are called to be helpmates in our marriage. And so if he's lazy and that's an actual thing, you're super frustrated. So you're not really looking to help your husband. You're looking for him to get his butt off the couch. So, but ultimately you're called to be a helpmate. And so if you really think about what would be helpful to him in that situation, it would be to pray for him and to pray for a like-mindedness between the two of you in terms of what he would be doing, what God has called him to do in leading your house financially. Is he working? Is this just when he gets off work? There's so many questions I have. But to speak to the lazy, if that's an actual thing and there's not an effort being made on his part and you really are doing it alone, then it's the same answer we've been saying. The Lord is going to provide for you, and you're going to be asking the Lord, what do I do? You can't do it all in your home, and you are meant to have a help, and especially in a marriage. And so if you feel like you're failing, which I can feel that way as a mother, that I'm failing, and I probably said it many times, so I understand the feeling of it, but in actuality, am I doing what God's calling me to do? Am I caring for my kids in the ways that He's called me to care for them? So these things that I have set as standards for my home, maybe they're not what God has set for my home. And it's even speaking maybe to the clean house thing. So if I'm the only one doing all of the things, and that's the thing that doesn't need to get highlighted right now, but I'm a clean freak, then I'm not doing what God has asked me to do. If what He's asked me to do is take care of my kids and to whatever the priorities are. So how did she word? Okay, so if I'm as a worker, so you're working outside of the home.
Yep, they both work. She comes home, feels like she's doing laundry, she's doing the dishes, she's getting the kids ready for school, she's packing the lunches for the next day while he sits around and does nothing, and then she feels like she's failing because not everything's getting done.
Because it's not getting done.
Right.
So there's a reality to that. If there is a reality to that, and that's happening in your home, again, what has God asked you to do? So it is a joyful thing if I'm in a right perspective with the Lord, if I am remembering who God's called me to be, remembering that He's equipped me for everything that I need to do, remembering that He truly wouldn't leave me out without helping me. If I'm remembering who God is and I'm understanding the relationship that I have with Him and it's taking priority, then I am going to look at that and not focus on the fact that I'm not covering all the bases. So I think it's perspective for the wife in a situation like that, because it is a joy to do all of those things. It's a gift if you're able to work. If your husband's not working, I guess that's the confusing part. Is he working? Are you the one working? He is working. They're both working. Okay. So that's something that you can be prayerful about, just like Christy was talking about, that maybe if you're feeling like everything else is not happening, then that's something that you let go of. So again, in prayer, you're going to ask the Lord, what would you have me do? Because the Lord knows your situation. The Lord knows your husband. The Lord knows if he's being lazy and the areas that he can do things different in. And it's the same with like the spiritual leader question. The Lord knows your husband and He cares for him and He wants him to be who He's created to be. And so if you're praying for him in a helpful tone and a helpful heart towards that, then you can't fix that and you can't change that. So stop trying and do what God is asking you to do. That would be my nutshell without having a coffee talk with you. So.
Chris, do you have anything? that you want to say?
Philippians 2 says, "Therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, any comfort of love, any fellowship of the Spirit, any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being one accord, one mind. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but for the interest of others." If your husband is not doing the things you want him to do, and he's asked you to be the one to make the lunches, and you to be the one to clean the house, and you to be the one to go to work, then your husband's asked you to do that. And you can grumble, and you can complain, and you can be mad, but in the end, the Bible says that you're to submit with all humility with your husband and joy. And so as much as I am sorry to say that, I do think that the way that you submit to your husband is a reflection of how you serve Christ. And to be like-minded, you said you feel like you're failing as a mother, a worker, a housekeeper. You didn't say you're failing as a wife. So maybe that is one area you're doing really well. But I would encourage you to focus on that. Maybe your husband's not leading you because there might be something there, but I would encourage him, pull him aside, sit down with him, talk to him, pray that God would bless you with an opportunity to sit and really encourage and let him know, my husband is probably not going to be the one to go, I don't know how often Matt helps get the kids ready for bed and brush their teeth and do all that. That's probably something that they just kind of think that's your thing, and you do it. But if you tell them, it's really hard for me to have to brush their teeth and do all the things and clean the house and do everything, and he might not see that. And so for me personally, what I usually do instead of complaining, I don't complain to my husband. I come with him with a solution. That's how we work in our marriage. I come and I say, you know what? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel like I can't get all this done. Is there any way that you could be in charge of this portion, and then I'll do the rest? Instead of me just coming and saying, I feel like I can't do any of this because you're not helping and you're lazy. So I come with a solution. So what's one thing your husband can do that would serve you? Is it, maybe putting the lunches together? Hey, when I put the kids to bed, do you think you could get their lunch? Or could you help with homework one night a week? Just start small or something. Or ask him, can you pick one thing that you could do to help? But it's the way you present that to your husband. The Bible's really clear. It says that husbands are to love their wives, and it says that wives are to respect their husbands. So I don't know if you call him lazy to his face, or if you just let him know that you think that's not going to be respectful, and it's not going to be received. So in this passage, it says that you're to look out not for your own interest, you look out for everyone else's. So you get up, you do the job God has called you to do, with the joy after you spend time with the Lord. And with that, I said that I clean my house. It doesn't mean that our walls are washed and our windows are sparkling. I just pick up the garbage. I make sure it's neat. I make it tidy. And that I do as much as I feel like God's called me to do. And so in your own home, you pray, God, today I don't have time to do this. Can I do something else? And let God tell you to cut those corners, or, get up earlier. One of the things that Marcy was really sweet to say to me one time was she encouraged me with, write down on a piece of paper how you spend your day. You woke up at 6 and you played on Facebook for 10 minutes. Then I went and had coffee, and then I fiddled around and did nothing. Then I did some laundry. I looked on Facebook another for 10 minutes. I texted some friends. So in my day, do I have any free time I could give over to somebody else? Mm-hmm. And I'm really not that, I'm not saying you're not that busy at all. I'm just saying now you might have to prioritize. If your husband's not stepping up, prioritize what's more important. So figure out what's in your schedule, and then pray that God would allow you to have an opportunity to talk to your husband in a real respectful way to see if he'll help you. So
I like that so much, because I think in the assumption of just assuming that there's just laziness and there's no healthy marriage, and there might
he might be lazy, but you have to submit to that.
Well, you do have to submit to that, but in the context of communication, I often find that even in the areas that I don't think my husband wants to help, if I bring it to him in a way that he can hear it, he absolutely does, because that's the heart that he has. And so I think, again, there's assumptions I even made in the question, that there's a view that you have towards him that you might not have. And if there's communication in your home, again, you're a helpmate. And so it doesn't, like Christy said, it doesn't help to call him lazy. It helps to ask him for help. And I think he's going to want to do that. So
I do have, so are we?
Yeah, on that note, spiritual leadership. Mm-hmm. How do you encourage him to be a spiritual leader in the home? if he's not doing it, or if he's prone to be. And to me, this goes back to the curse, where the dude is prone to be lazy because it's tied to the curse, where we're going to work by the sweat of our brow through thorns and thistles. And the curse of the woman, that she's going to desire to rule over him, and it's like the battle of the sexes. So we're already bent to, in our flesh and in our sin, sit there while she runs the show and submit our leadership over to her, and then she's on the flip side trying to take over, and it's like this huge spiritual battle. But for this situation, continuing on with that, how do you encourage him as a wife to pick up the ball and be that spiritual leader?
The first place that I go is, what does a spiritual leader look like to you? Does he have a relationship with the Lord? Is he walking in a way that is a sincere walk with the Lord? Because that is leadership. And so you would get behind that, and you would encourage him in his walk with the Lord. So I guess that's the question. I don't know the context of that, and if they are walking with the Lord, or if there's no walk with the Lord, because I think that's two different questions. So which one do we want to do first?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in the spiritual part is going to make the hard question. And I saw some of the questions that came in. It was like, how do I get my husband to lead in raising our kids? Or how do I get my husband to lead in the spiritual matters of our house? Or how do I get my husband to lead in our marriage? And so in general, I do think that the leadership in in a marriage is all kind of related. I mean, if we're just talking about pray with our family, that's spiritual. But like, if a husband's not disciplining the kids, that's a very spiritual matter, in the sense that the kids are not going to see that godly leadership in a home. And there's this whole spiritual aspect of a husband just being the man of the house, to being the godly leader, to being the one who is really coming in with the authority of the house. For the last question, that's why I whispered to you, because I didn't know what question we were answering. With that whole question, the last question about him not leading and not doing what she wants him to do, Scripture is really clear that the husband is the head of the home, and as Christ is the head of the church. And so if we take away Christ as the head of the church, how are we going to function, truly? We're going to fail. We're going to fail miserably. And we may think we can do it, and women, we all think we can do it, but really, truly, I think the part that we miss is God has given us our husbands, and as much as we don't think they can do something, or they can't raise the kids, or they can't make decisions, they have gifts just in the fact that they are the men of our homes, and that it's a godly representation of Christ, that we should encourage them to lead. We should encourage that. And to be brutally honest, my husband and I go through this. Zach is not a super firm, wanting to stand strong and say, I'm taking charge of this. And I can be totally like, I know how to do this. I got this. And so we have to come to a middle ground there. And for our marriage, for the first couple of years, I had to encourage him to lead. And by that, I had to not lead. So that would be the first thing. You want your husband to be the spiritual leader? Stop leading. So in that, I truly, I'm not joking, I watched somebody do this once. Her husband asked her a question about their kids. Are we going to take the kids and do this thing? And she said, I don't know. What are you going to do? And he goes, well, I don't know. And she goes, okay, well, when you decide, then we'll make a decision. Mm-hmm. And she did not make the decision. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so when your husband says, hey, are we going on vacation this weekend? Or hey, are we going to this thing this week? You just look at him and say, yeah, I don't know. So you just let me know what our plans are. And you don't make the plans when he doesn't do it. You just don't do it. So there's been multiple things where Zach's like, are we not going to do this thing? And I'm like, oh, well, you never told me we were. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. So I remind him respectfully, hey, are we going to do this? Because you haven't made a decision yet. And so don't make the decision if they don't. But also...
Okay, hold that thought right there, okay. Because the continuation to that is, and we're talking about how to encourage your husbands to be leaders.
I was going to use an example in spiritual. So in spiritual stuff, this is one thing. I want him to pray with us as a family. That's just important to me. I want him to pray. So I say to him when we're alone one time, like, hey, it's really important. Would you please just remember to pray with us as a family every day before this thing? And for us, it was before bed. Because he can be busy or I can be doing it, but I would like Zach to come in the room and be the one to lead it. I would like it not to always be mom is telling us to do this thing. And it was with the older boys is how it started, because I had 11 and 8-year-old sons when they got adopted. So I wanted Zach to come in. And he's like, yes, I will do that for you. And I said, okay. And so I told him what I wanted. He agreed to it. So the whole week, he didn't come in. And then that week, I'm like, what do? Do I go and yell at him now and say, like, hey, you lied? So I go in and I said, hey, do you want me to remind you when we're going to go to bed to come pray? He says, oh yeah, will you do that? And it's great. So then the next week, when he didn't come in, I walked in and I said, hey, you asked me to remind you. He said, oh yeah. So the week before, when I didn't ask him if he wanted to be reminded, I'm going to come to him and say, hey, it's bedtime. What's going on? Are you coming? And it seems super disrespectful. But the next week when I said, would you like me to remind you? I come and I say, hey, you wanted me to remind you. And so it's him asking me to remind him and then me doing it. So who's in the leadership there? So it's just a way of dealing with your husband in respect. So now, Zach, one other small example would be in raising the kids. My older sons, when they were 15 and 16, would be super disrespectful to me verbally. They would say something snotty, and my husband's sitting there, and he's not responding. So is that good, godly leadership right there? And it's not. So I would say to him, like, hey, what the heck? And he would say, I didn't even hear it. I'm like totally zoned out. Like I'm sitting there working on my laptop, I don't hear it. So he said, I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Like next time I can't just take it. He said, I said, what do you want me to do? He's like, just text me. So no joke, because it pops up on his laptop. I said, did you hear what Israel just said? Because I just text him. And he just looks up and he's like, what did you just say to your mom? And so I have to help him lead, but he wants to lead. And so if he doesn't hear it, I help him. If he doesn't remember to pray, I don't just dismiss him and assume he doesn't want to pray. I encourage him. I want to do Bible studies as a family. So I politely ask him, and then I make sure the night is available for the night he wants to do it, and we do it. So with that, I let him lead it, but I tell him what I desire or what I want to have in my relationship with God and him in the home. So, but I don't yell at him or treat him poorly when he doesn't follow through or do it the way I want. And when he does Bible study, just keep your mouth shut, ladies. I would encourage that. I've watched husbands give Bible studies to their kids, and the wife chimes in to get the points in.
Okay, so that was my point, is that you'll have a situation where you're like, hey, I want you to make a decision.
Yes.
And then I've seen the husband goes, okay, and they make a decision, and then the wife goes, well, what about this? And that's not the decision she wanted, so immediately she's grabbing the reins back and go, well, we're going to go this way. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If you want me to lead, then that means I'm going to make a decision. But when I make a decision, you can't take it away from me because you're just going to do what you want anyway.